I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to feel me. Don't hear my words. Listen to what is underneath them. Listen to the history of my soul, coming through in everything that I do, every facial expression, each glint of my eye, but mostly in how I make you feel. I am telling you nothing, yet you can feel something about who I am. And not from my borrowed words, but because you're listening with something deeper, with your emotions, with everything in you that understands where I am, where I have been, because you might have been there too. Okay, what are you using to do that? To pick up information about me? The obvious ones, tone of voice, body language. Your more subtle tools of communication, empathy, an understanding of my mental states because you have them too. And even more subtle tools. A recent study on the scent of fear showed that human beings can actually smell fear, and the human sense of smell has been vastly underrated. So our toolboxes for communication are much deeper than we consciously realize. And if you listened to me with your 5 senses, watched what the cues of my body and facial expressions were saying and whether they aligned with my words, listened to the shades of my voice, you will be picking up truths about me, irrespective of the image that I'm trying to project. But what happens when we don't use that nonverbal toolbox for communication and instead rely on carefully curated words? A situation very similar to the story that sparked my curiosity in the subject of why we so often say what we don't mean and what the consequences are in our personal relationships and in the world around us. The story comes from a close friend who was having a conversation with a friend of hers, a British economist. This British economist wrote extensive, vigorously intellectual arguments on why Brexit was such a bad idea economically. When my friend gave her own reasons in support of Brexit, the economist was becoming vehement, more and more ruffled and irritable and angry and shooting out all her economic arguments against it. And my friend was like, hang on a second, there's something much deeper going on here. And she kept probing, and what's driving all of this? Eventually, the economist admitted that the day after Brexit was announced, when she left her home in London, her neighbors screamed over the fence at her, "Go back home. We voted to get your kind out of here." The economist's parents were originally from Pakistan. From the intellectual arguments that she provided, we cannot even talk about, let alone resolve, what the economist sees as the real problem, xenophobia, because she's disguising it so well with a straw problem, economics. Her words shed absolutely no light on what her real concerns and authentic motivations are. But here's the thing, it's her real concern that causes her to act. The real fear of xenophobia that drives her to write the article on economics. So what we see from this is twofold. Firstly, that the truth lies in our deepest drives and intentions, which are often very different from what we say they are. And secondly, that it is these deep drives that cause us to act and thereby create the world we live in. Because if human beings are behind institutions, the World Bank, the UN, the church, the government, the education system, and institutions construct the fabric of reality around us, then what drives institutions is always going to be what drives the human beings behind them. And what drives human beings are always these deep drives and intentions. Yet we are so seldom honest about them. We see it happening in every sphere of our world, every conversation, every newspaper article. Sometimes it is as benign as telling an acquaintance, "I'm great, my life amazing," when you're on the verge of a nervous breakdown. This is what the average Facebook profile looks like. Other times, this hiding of true intent is much more malignant: political corruption, bigotry with devastating consequences for millions. And not only does it lead to our spending copious amounts of time engaging with a false reality, it leaves us helpless to actually change things in the real reality. So why do we do it? Why is deceptive communication the norm, even amongst friends? We take it so for granted that we don't always say what we mean. We're always projecting these fronts. Surely there's something driving this. The world of tufted capuchin monkeys holds a great answer to this question. When this little guy is competing with dominant monkeys over valuable food resources, he will use an alarm call, normally reserved for predators, to make sure that fellow monkeys stay away, because it was so dangerous that now he can eat all the food that was really there. This is in line with a theory called Machiavellian intelligence, which posits that we became increasingly intelligent by learning how to manipulate others better, to lie to them without their realizing, because the best manipulators, i.e. the most intelligent, managed to outsurvive the apes who are schmucks. But evolution marches forth, and the environment has changed. Can we still say that the ability to manipulate is a measure of intelligence today? Well, if intelligence is considered as the ability to best deal with complexity, then in today's information overload world, the best way to deal with complexity is the ability to strip away all the false arguments that are only increasing complexity and to see the underlying truths beneath. Today's intelligent are not necessarily the ones who are best able to manipulate, but the ones who are best able to see beneath the manipulations. So the most important part, how? How do we see truths beneath complex arguments? To give you a bit of background on why I'm so passionate about this topic, it has always been the most important thing in my life. That thing that makes me feel alive, to connect deeply with people, to be real. And when it came time to choose a career, I had to be a writer. I had to write about our journeys, about the things that make us tick, the things that make us keep going, what's really in our hearts and in our minds. And in my interviews with people, I have to be able to sense all of this. I have to be able to take them to a place where we can talk about this. And we all do this so intuitively. But I thought about a framework that I could give you that at least makes this process more tangible. And it consists of two methods. The first one I call the Tolstoy method. In Anna Karenina, Tolstoy writes through one of his characters, Kitty, one must find out what one is arguing for, what is most precious to him. Then one can, and Kitty cuts off there. But we know exactly what she means. Then one can understand him. So applying the Tolstoy method to our British economist, what is she arguing for? A sense of belonging, a world without prejudice. What is most precious to her? Safety of her family, her loved ones, her community. So how would you get to the point of uncovering that? Because she's certainly not going to write about it in the newspaper. And this is where method 2 comes in. Desires, aversions, and whys. It is how you, the listener, lead the speaker to a truer place, to that place that she's arguing for. Start with desires. Pay particular attention to what makes someone's eyes light up, what makes her speed up with excitement, her hands pulse with energy, All of these things tell you what she's passionate about, and what she's passionate about is driven by her deepest desires. Next, aversion. What topic does someone shy away from? Don't even go there. Or keep returning to with this angry, irritable energy? What someone is particularly averse to or negative towards is always going to be driven by fear. Finally, the whys. These are essential because without them, you won't be able to keep leading the speaker deeper and deeper. Each clue, each lead given to you by her nonverbal expression, her body language, energy, eyes, all these clues need to be followed by why. You see her eyes light up. Why did they light up? What was driving that? You sense anxiety. What does she fear will happen? What does she fear she will lose? Eventually, the most remarkable thing happens. You lead the speaker to a place where she can open up, not to you, but to herself. At this point in my interviews with people, they're not even looking at me. I'm just a mirror typing away at a computer, and they have been transported to a transcendent place. Finally, they are in communion with themselves, and always surprised and amused by what they find there. Because the crazy thing is, we are such good manipulators that we even manipulate ourselves. Half the time, we don't even know what's really driving us or what our deep intentions are. Perhaps it's buried very deep, or we're ashamed of our darker, socially unacceptable emotions. So don't even bother being a listener. Be a reflector. Be that person who can sense all the stuff going underneath and take your speaker to that place. Then the two of you with fresh eyes can turn those beliefs over. Are they true of reality? Or are they maybe just inherited baggage? That is how you understand the speaker from her perspective, not yours. And that is where shifts of thinking and behavior happen. Just be mindful. It can be very disarming to be so naked in front of someone, to have your bare drives exposed. So as the listener, you need to create this safe, compassionate space, a space to be curious about what's really going on. That space is what makes it so invigorating to be alive, and it is your only chance of changing the things that you want to change about the world. Because when you see the underlying stuff that is really driving reality, the fear of being unsafe in a British economist, the lust for power in a politician, the desire to be loved in an impossible colleague, finally, the real problem can be resolved. So let's be real. Let's get down to that deep space of communication at the most guttural level, back to our basic drives that connect us as human beings. Let's talk about what we're arguing for, what we most desire and fear, and why. Because only when we see each other's minds can minds shift. And only when minds shift can the behavior that is creating our world shift. Thank you.